Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eighth episode of the AI Healthcare Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Reed, and today we are joined with my friend Tanner Aliff, who is the Policy Director for the Right on Healthcare at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dylan.
And Tanner, I'm just curious, what motivated you to jump from DC to Austin in helping to make a more positive impact on healthcare?
It's a good question. When I was living on the West Coast, you're kind of alienated from politics and policy. And I felt it as I was starting to leave the emergency department and leave my path of clinical neuropsychology. I thought the right place to go to was Congress. Because that's where all the good ideas are born, right? And I feel
Yeah.
like I finally got there, and I was working with my boss, Congressman Mark Green, at Tennessee at the time, and there was never a moment where Mark would come up and say, "Hey, Tanner, I want you to come up with a brand new spanking idea how to change healthcare in America." He'd always ask, "What did Texas do? What did Tennessee do? What did Virginia do? What did Washington, New York do?" Which told me really quickly that policy, ideation, creation, these things don't necessarily happen in the realm of Congress. It's actually very downstream. Really, the states are like the policy laboratories of America, where you get to experiment and try some. You do get to take some risk. If it works out for multiple states, that's when you see it kind of make its way over to the federal arena. And I wanted to be more on the cutting edge. So at the time, I was like, okay, I love DC, love my people here, but if I want to actually see something original, something new, something impactful, is going to take place in the states. And Texas, I mean, it's a bellwether state, right? It's between Florida, New York, Texas, and California, and I know where I wanted to be. So I chose Austin, man, Texas, baby. Remember the Alamo.
Yeah, and I was I believe the average time now to like pass a bill in Congress is like 10 to 15 years, assuming the person's still there, hasn't died or hasn't been arrested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot faster. Well, I mean, probably not with the core public opinions. It's not their speed, but comparing the two side by side, yeah, you can get stuff done in like a year or two in the
Wow.
states. It can be really revolutionary and also impactful in a good way.
No, that's great. And then kind of bleeds into my next question nicely. So the goal of the Texas Public Policy Foundation is to promote liberty, free enterprise, as well as personal responsibility. And just out of curiosity, how does the implementation of AI in healthcare in Austin and overall in Texas play into that equation?
Also, a good question. I think so. My foundation's mission is to make sure that Texas is the freest state possible, which means that people get to enjoy their freedom and get to use it as they see fit. And when it comes to the world of AI, I think that we should be thinking of AI as a tool, right? To
Hmm.
mitigate time, like, whether you're like, oh man, I want to like have a virtual office assistant. I want something to help out with my HR. I want something to help with customer satisfaction. I want to have something take a stab at writing a testimony, drafting a piece, like a tweet or something. These are all things that are in the realm of AI, and it can really help people like essentially accelerate what their kind of like work potential is. The question I think the foundation has is like, as we see all these like theoretical ideas about AI pop up, it's like, what is actually going to promote human flourishing, and what are the guardrails, if there are any guardrails needed to actually make sure that happens. But I think I can't speak on entirely the behalf of the foundation, but I think all of us, many of us in the foundation, are kind of curious to see what happens. I think like there's a lot of hype around this stuff, but no one's actually made what, outside of OpenAI and some other groups. There's been some ideas and nuggets of what can be done. But
Hmm.
looking at the 5 year out, we're not so sure what it's going to entail.
Hmm.
So I think officially though, the foundation probably look at AI as like as long as it promotes human flourishing, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's totally in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and it's you're in Austin. I'm originally from Dallas. If
Yeah,
no one else has known that at
more
this
real
point,
Texas.
but it's like in Texas, you have a lot of great testing areas like Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin too, as well, to kind of see how this gets implemented on
Mhm.
a population level.
Yeah, no, I mean, Texas, there's a reason that a lot of people are coming from Silicon Valley to Austin, and also just Texas in general, Houston or Dallas too. There's just a land of opportunity. The tax treatment's fair. The regulatory atmosphere is not too bad. And people are able to find a home and they want to create here. And I think that the Texas legislator definitely wants to keep that reputation going. I don't, they want to kind of live past the Austin hype and make sure that people, 5 years from now are still thinking that Texas is a good place to do business.
Hmm. Great. And then, could you just give us like a 10,000 foot overview of HB4 and SB 2105 and why they're critical bills impacting the use of AI in healthcare?
Yeah, so we had a couple pieces, and those two were very key and distinguishable in this kind of conversation talking about tech and AI in Texas. So House Bill 4 was championed by Representative Capriglione. That's kind of it's colloquially known as the Digital Bill of Rights, and really what I think like a lot of the authors of the bill were trying to accomplish was that they wanted to make sure that there were guardrails in place and that we can find this Goldilocks zone where we can appease a lot of the Black Hawk Republicans and the people that are really, critical about their data, and make sure that they have like codified in statute rights to understand how their personal information is being processed, to also making sure that they have a right to access it, also making sure that gosh, I want to say, what was the other one? Oh yeah, and also to correct inaccurate data as well. Those were kind of key features and kind of brought like establishing really rights for you as a consumer and Texan, and being able to access data like collected about you or like to your likeness and characteristics. Also, gosh, I would say that another noticeable thing is that because the game is like trying not to be too onerous with regulation, so like I imagine some of the rights were more just so for patients usage and to like help out in the courts when there is a kerfuffle that happens. Then the thing that's kind of like the where we're going to probably see people have be required to do something is I think that controllers, that's the terminology used to essentially anyone involved in tech collecting data, are now required to create an appeals process on
Hmm.
like so like you have the attorney general now being allowed to conduct investigations when a patient's right is violated, or like sorry, I can't say patient because healthcare, man. When a Texan's rights is violated here. So think of it like you hear that there's a data breach somewhere, and you want to know like what your information with an organization was. You request it, and the place says no. That's the kind of thing where the attorney general, being prompted by a complaint from that Texan, would then have like an investigation conducted theoretically. And then there's also going to be like aspects on the private side where it's like the organization or the tech company now has to kind of furnish on their websites and apps like different modalities to kind of communicate that people are like kind of showing like how's it being processed.
Hmm.
Here's the place where you can access the stuff that we have on you, and then an opportunity to correct any data. Um, Senate Bill 2105 was championed by Senator Johnson. This one is more about, I would say, protecting patients amid with. Actually, no, it's more about transparency. Let's say, yeah, it's more of a transparency play with data brokers.
Hmm.
So, like some kind of key features there is that data brokers now have to provide notice on all their websites and apps that they are indeed a third-party data broker, which is kind of a new thing. Also, I believe all third-party data brokers have to register with the Secretary of the State. And again, I think, and like the feedback has been good about both bills. I think, but tech was involved, and they didn't see anything onerous. Like, there's not going to be too much that changes outside like your user agreement. Really, it's just going to be about creating a new portal on your website that essentially allows people to get eyes on what you're collecting on them, essentially. Um, Besides that, trying to think if there's anything else notable. I guess the both these bills communicate to me that this is all about getting ahead, right? I think that we really want to just set down like this is the framework from which like entities should be thinking through and how they can protect their users, like their users' data, because that's the
Hmm.
thing in Texas, right? Like we're all scared of the big brother Black Hawk Republican kind of like fear that's going on there. And so it's like trying to appease that sentiment, just kind of like from the get go, have like some foundational ground rules on how this is supposed to look. Also, with Senate Bill 2105, there is a lot of extensive, yes, but requirements on essentially protecting and kind of securing data. It's kind of funny. It's like you essentially saw like the intensity of HIPAA now
Hmm.
starting to trickle over to other forms of data collected
Hmm.
on users. So that is also a notable feature. But really, this isn't like meant to deter or like just say we don't want AI or tech to keep growing here in Texas. I thought it was more like we definitely just want to think about the future and make sure that people do have like fundamental rights with their data to act on.
Mhm.
Because with the enforcement and regulatory process, like it requires buy-in to see fulfillment, right? Like the attorney general could be theoretically conducting all these investigations, but really, like how much is he going to find out, right? Like a
Mhm.
lot of this, it's about creating like opportunity for Texans to have a say and have awareness of what's going on with their data.
Mhm. And you brought up an interesting point. Me here being in DC and you having DC experience, we kind of understand kind of how how the system works,
Yeah, the
more or
swamp,
less.
baby, the swamp.
Swamp. But it's interesting because in DC the solution has always been either following a framework, which it seems like 9 times out of 10, you with your congressional experience, no one really follows, or you
Hmm.
have a task force, and I use that term loosely, but with 10 people who are experienced in the space, and then you just get 10 different opinions. So
Hmm. Yeah. I know. Actually, I forgot. There is a new advisory board too that's going to be kind of keeping track on all the data brokers as well as some other tech entities. So funny. I know,
yeah.
man. Those task force. Some
Yeah.
are more productive than others.
Yeah. But kind of what has been the overall feedback you have received from key state stakeholders on HB4, SB 2105, and then just kind of like AI in general?
Yeah. Surprise, surprise. All the kind of consumer protection organizations were very thrilled. I think a lot of the think tanks were satisfied, and this was very common sense form. Um, there was not terribly too much. Like I didn't hear about anything like just on the airways or with friends that are in like the venture capital world or tech about this being like really onerous or problematic. I think that everyone in Texas, like the legislator as well as venture capital and tech, it's all just kind of holding their breath
Hmm.
because they're kind of like, who's going to make the first move? Who's going to take the charge and really say, like, what is good and what is bad? What is the use case for AI? Is there like an incentive for us to kind of focus on where we should be building first? It's just there's a little bit of a lull because this is so new and we're all trying to navigate all the stuff that's coming down. So I haven't heard like any like outstanding like complaints or lamentations, to be honest.
Okay, great. And kind of, we touched upon it briefly, but how do you see HB4 and Senate Bill 2105 being used as models for AI healthcare policy at the federal level?
Hmm. What, the federal government taking a taking a lesson from the states? Um, no, I think this is a great opportunity. I mean, Texas is a giant economy. There's a lot of different elements like geographies, different types of people, city markets, different companies that are in Texas. And so, kind of seeing as tech grows in Texas is a great opportunity to like kind of make sure that you have like your comms up and you're actually able to keep track. If tech folks are saying like, oh, turns out that like the 19 new like security like protocols I have to do, otherwise I'll get investigated by attorney general, are really onerous and it's cost me more money than I anticipated. Now I want to move to like Oklahoma or something. Like um again, it's like it's kind of hard to make heads or tails um what the federal government can really pull right now from Texas. Other than that, like Texas is trying to like hit that Goldilocks zone, right?
Hmm.
Making sure that patients feel secure. Again, I keep saying patients, man. I guess like I just was I've been
Yeah.
talking to a lot of doctors and hospitals. Well, Texans feel secure, right?
Hmm.
And that they still really roll out that red carpet for tech to
Hmm.
stay and keep coming here. But until we see someone kind of make a definitive play or make a more like harder take on what should be allowed, I don't know if there's anything much to talk about. I will say though is that this some of the state agencies were given license. I forgot what the bill that allowed them to do, but I know that DIR, or is it DRI? But DIR, the company, they're kind of there's a I think it was either Department of State. No, it was oh gosh, it's one of our agencies, man. But no, we're now using them to clean data warehouse stuff. So like there is like the actual state agencies now using some AI application. And I think that's kind of like a testing ground, and seeing results from there could
Hmm.
be telling.
Hmm. And it's interesting because it seems like most of the AI innovation, from what I've read and what I've seen, um, has been mainly in southern states.
Hmm.
I wrote, don't mean to be too promotional in this episode, but I wrote a little case study about why that is, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's a low cost of living area,
Yep.
access to world class universities, and then as well to I forgot the four things, but the third one that I really think that really doesn't get talked about is non-unionized states.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to AI, I don't have to worry about strikes that you're seeing with the auto manufacturers,
Yeah.
and I don't have to worry about kind of what was in California recently, where they're paying healthcare professionals $25 an hour now. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's kind of interesting to see kind of the dynamics that we're kind of seeing with kind of conventional healthcare, and then healthcare with AI.
Mm. Yeah, it's I'd agree with all your reasons as to like why people are coming here, right? I mean, even I, like, when the moment I left DC and I didn't have to pay a state income tax, changed my life, right? And tech, you have high grossing salaries, right? And that's kind of the allure for, like, whether you're in a startup or if you're a more established organization that's just putting like a headquarters or a building in Austin.
Hmm.
Like, you get to keep pocket more of your money, and that keeps your employees really happy. So there is it is trying to keep that disposition, right, towards tech. Like, hey, like, come here, it makes sense. Austin, Dallas, Houston are fun. San Antonio, sure. Like,
Yeah.
all great stuff. But the
Hmm.
thing that I find kind of curious, though, is that while you might not have like a union problem, um, there is kind of a fear, though, like, not substantiated, but there are folks like worried about displacement.
Hmm.
And again, we were talking a little bit earlier, but the thing that's kind of new for AI, and why maybe there's even a little bit of pushback going on right now, is because when we saw all the blue collar people throw up their arms, when you saw like the introduction of the robotic arm and an assembly line in factories, right? There was upheaval, questions of, like, people that were factory line workers for 10 years now losing their job and not having other skills to like help them transition to another role.
Hmm.
We're now seeing this phenomenon with white collar folks, right? Whether it be a paralegal, a lawyer, doctors,
Hmm.
reporters. Actually, I've joked with my supervisor that give it a couple years and you won't need a policy director anymore. Um, well, it's all like it's all hysteria, right? Like, because we know that the goal is not ultimately because you lose customers that way if you start displacing a lot of people. It's really just to think through what can AI do to help people be better at their roles, right? And also, what are the things that AI will replace that we can now supplement new like knowledge as employees to be
Hmm.
able to use that AI, right? So we're having a kind of like there's been a lot of fruitful discussions about like kind of mitigating the hysteria, but also kind of preparing for what a theoretical future could look like.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like what's really been dominating the pink building over in Austin.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like we're never going to get over the hysteria when we actually have like a clear definition of what AI actually is.
I
Um,
know, I know.
I mean, here in Washington, people don't, you ask people what is AI, and they're like, it's like a computer. Like, there's no clear, like, how are you supposed to, quote unquote, have federal intervention in an area, and you don't even know how to define the term in the first place?
Yeah, that's part of the hesitation too. I've seen a few folks speak in the federal arena about it, and also Texas, and I thought it was kind of funny because they're both like unsure how to necessarily broach it right now.
Hmm.
And I think there is a huge kind of education hurdle for a lot of members in the states and also the federal arena. I mean, because to them, like, they haven't been keeping tabs on like what's going on in Silicon, what's going on in Austin, right? And you have all this new stuff actually hit the market. Obviously, OpenAI really changed the game and really just hyperdrive all of the kind of op-eds, headlines about AI, and people are just like, oh man, like they're starting to throw out all these random ideas what it could be. And really the game has just been like base education. Like, again, like there was a really great summit that happened in Austin where you saw like a lot of key stakeholders all present. And whether it be like a UT ethics professor or like, and you have Google's like a Google software engineer or Representative Cabriglione, the whole idea was like, okay, this is what we know. This is
Hmm.
where we should go. And it's kind of like we're all like looking across the room. It's like everyone's on board. Everyone's on board. And then all of a sudden someone's like, what about my job? And it's like, okay, we're gonna stop. We're gonna talk about it now. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how that's really how it feels. Not to make it too melodramatic,
Okay.
but
And then, and it bleeds into my last question is, what do you see as the discrepancy between the way Congress and then the states, such as, what we talked about, Texas and Tennessee, where laws have been successfully passed for AI?
Mhm. Well, I think I think we're still recovering. Well, because you just have tension, right? You have like some like new veins or strains, if you will, of populism kind of creating a little bit of pandemonium, both the Democratic and Republican parties. And I think that's all like very pronounced and emphasized at the national level. And so again, I don't know if you're gonna like you might just I hope the conversation doesn't become like the classic like one side's super for it, one side's like just I hate tech and all of AI, right? I really want to avoid that, but I feel like the national like the national stage kind of incubates and
Hmm.
fosters that kind of mentality. So I think there's a great opportunity though for the states like Texas and Tennessee who've now passed laws to go a little bit further, get ahead, have some good press about what the thought process, the explanations behind why these regulations laws are coming out, what's the goal, what's like the Goldilocks zone, and I think that can be kind of transplanted to the to the federal arena, hopefully.
Hmm.
But it's kind of hard to make heads or tails of it right now, to be honest.
Awesome. Great. And where can people find more about you, Tanner, or the Texas Public Policy Foundation?
Well, if you Google Texas Public Policy Foundation, I'm one of the first faces in the staff. Click drop down menu.
Hmm.
LinkedIn is just Tanner Aliff. It's all right there. I like LinkedIn a lot more than Twitter. You can tell by the disparity in my follower count. Twitter is just at TLF5.
Awesome. Well, thank you for again. And do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Podcast episodes are also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And do not forget to check out my newsletter, the AI Healthcare Report, on LinkedIn. This is Dylan Reed signing off. Thank you so much for your time, Tanner.
Oh, thank you, Dylan.